Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. So today we are going to look at the rumors around Boston Bruins goaltender Linus Ullmark, what could be on the table for him in a trade and things like that. We're going to discuss all of that today. Before we get into today's video, guys, it's the off season for the NHL, but it's never the off season here on the channel. Stay tuned to the channel this summer. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll be giving you guys updates throughout the entirety of the summer. Also, if you're going to be checking out the NHL shop, use the link down below. You might have to copy and paste it and put it into a link. If you want to help support the channel, if you're going to be buying NHL stuff anyway, use that code down below or scan the QR code on my community link on the channel to buy some NHL merch. We're affiliated with the NHL, so if you'd like to shop at NHL.com, use that as well. All right, so now that that's out of the way, Bruins, Linus Ullmark, goaltending, what teams are on the table? Let's discuss it. So let's start off with some of the teams mentioned. And this is from the fourth period the other day. They said the Kings, Devils, Senators, Hurricanes, Oilers, and the Detroit Red Wings are all options for Linus Ullmark. Now, Linus Ullmark's situation is kind of interesting because a lot of it surrounds Jeremy Swayman, which his deal is supposed to be kicking in. They're going to need to re-sign him this summer, and it looks like the number is going to be somewhere between I'm going to guess anywhere between an 8-year deal and $7 to $9 million. I know that's a $2 million range, but the rumor has been it's looking like a potentially 8 deal, right? 8 years, $8 million per season. You do the math. I'm not very good at math, but I think that's $64 million over the next pretty much decade for Linus Ullmark. I would say that's a pretty nice deal. Or for Jeremy Swayman, excuse me. So that means if they're going to give $8 million to Jeremy Swayman, they probably don't have the money right now to keep both Ullmark and Swayman. And Swayman still is under an RFA tag, so he is technically still a guy they could trade. I just think they're going to prioritize re-signing Swayman, keeping him around, and Ullmark likely is going to see the door. And if he does see the door, like I said, some of these teams mentioned are kind of interesting in their own way. So let's start off with the Kings. So the Kings, the first benefit about the Kings, they're in the Western Conference, right? They still like Linus Ullmark. They know he's a good goaltender. So why keep him in the NHL? Or at least a guy we're going to see more than twice a year, right? And if you send him to some of these other teams, you're going to see him a couple times. And if you make the playoffs, you might see him in the first one or two or three rounds. You know, it's much less likely you see him in the Western Conference. But we've seen, especially with the Bruins being one of these teams in the past, where they will trade, I think it was Martin Jones, right? Martin Jones was on the Kings. He got traded to the Bruins, and the Bruins immediately flipped him back to San Jose, right? So we know how that story went. So it doesn't necessarily matter. I think teams have figured that out. If there's a really good value on the table, they will take it if it's a team in their conference or division. But it would be a nice benefit if he was in the West and stayed in the West, right? So that's what we're looking at with the Kings. They're really tied up with money, though, so if I'm the Bruins, they're going to have to take money back in some form, and that is where things get interesting, because do you take a waiver on maybe one of those kind of middle-of-the-road players in LA, you know? And I hate to say that, but do you take a Rasmus Kupari, or do you take a chance on an Alex Turcotte? And his money isn't necessarily there. They need to put some money on this deal going back to Boston. But I'm interested in terms of what assets the Kings would be willing to trade. What are the Bruins interested? And what is the value of a player like Turcotte, right? Like, it's not nearly what it used to be, but is there anything left there? In terms of defensemen, I think the Bruins are set for their blue line, so they probably don't need any of the Kings' blue line. I would say this is a deal where the Bruins are going to look to add forward depth, maybe take on a salary just because, it's one of those things you don't want to do, but they might have to. And like I said, I don't think the Kings are the most likely team here, and you'll see why in a minute. So the next one is the New Jersey Devils. The Devils are interesting because what I think is good about the Devils is they're at least not in the Atlantic Division. So, yeah, you know what? It's still pretty close in New Jersey, but it's far enough away where you're not going to see them 5 or 6 times during the regular season. So I think that's a benefit. The other thing I will say about the Devils is they have some pretty good younger assets that the Kings don't really have. You look at a guy like Alexander Holtz, Dawson Mercer. Those are some good young players on the Devils that could be up for trade, and I think the Bruins could get them for a better value than they're probably worth right now. We've seen these two teams make deals in the past, and I think it's something that is pretty feasible here. I think this is a deal that could work. The Devils have enough money where they could get a deal for Ullmark in. It's not like the Bruins have to really take back a ton of salary in a return. And like I said, in terms of maybe having to take one of the Devils goalies, I don't know how that would play out, but maybe that's on the table. And I don't think the Devils are afraid to trade their draft picks. If there's a situation where something arises where, dare I say, that 5th overall pick, is that in play for a deal like Linus Ullmark? Probably not, but maybe because that 5th round pick or the 5th overall pick stays for the Devils, maybe they're more willing to trade one of those players like Dawson Mercer, or the other player I talked about earlier. I completely forgot his name. Jesus. So anyway, that's a good destination, I think, for Linus Ullmark. I can't believe I just blanked on whoever the other guy was just talking about him. Anyway, the Ottawa Senators. So the Senators are in a situation of their own with Joonas Korpisalo. So I don't think anything's happening for the Senators until they trade him out first. If there's a deal where the Senators can trade out Korpisalo, I think they will be pursuing Ullmark. Ullmark is another guy that could come in a deal maybe where the Senators have to also trade like Jacob Chychrun. So it's Chychrun and Ullmark. But again, is that somebody that the Bruins are pursuing right now? Probably not. They probably would have to flip a guy like Chychrun in another deal. And maybe that's where this becomes a 3-team trade, where the Bruins get a forward, Chychrun goes the other way in terms of an asset, and then something comes to Boston, right? So there's ways to get around that, especially now that we've seen the 3-team trade era in full effect. Between 1-and-1 trades, they can find a way to make deals work. So for the Bruins, maybe it means trading some first-round picks with a Korpisalo deal, sending money somewhere like Utah maybe, I don't know, and finding a way to get something there. I mean, if I'm Boston, if I'm looking at maybe a team like Arizona or now Utah, right? Let's say they take Kirill Vejmelka back and maybe one of those younger players. And now it's coming down to the point where when you have guys like Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley coming up, does that make some of the guys that played really well in Arizona last year maybe more expendable and an option for the Bruins to add some scoring depth, right? I know they want to add down the middle, but if they could get maybe one of those younger wingers, that could be a really nice addition to the Bruins as well this offseason. So I think with Ullmark and the Senators, I think a lot's got to happen still for that deal to happen, but it's something to consider. Now, the Hurricanes are really interesting. I like the Hurricanes here because the whole situation around Marty Necas is very enticing if I'm a Bruins fan, right? He scores goals, probably hasn't reached his full potential yet in Carolina. I don't think he's been utilized properly, and they need a center. And he is all 3 of those categories. And the Bruins definitely, I think the fans have been ogling over the idea of adding a guy like Marty Necas to their lineup. Now, for the Hurricanes' perspective, is Linus Ullmark enough? I think so. I think that is really the missing piece for the Carolina Hurricanes is stable, good goaltending. They could get that from Linus Ullmark. Now, this is one that could blow up in the face of the Bruins pretty quickly because they've played them in the Stanley Cup playoffs recently, right? I think it was 2019. They played in the Eastern Conference Finals against each other, and I think they've played even more recently than that in the playoffs. But either way, I think this is one that, like I said, could come back to bite the Bruins in the butt. But if you're getting Marty Necas in return, I'll take that opportunity. I'll take that chance because we have Jeremy Swayman, right? And like I said, it's not ideal, but it's something that can work, and it's the good base of a trade. Marty Necas to Boston, Linus Ullmark to Carolina. I think there could be a deal kind of worked out and construed from that. Let me know what you guys think. The other team that I think is much higher on the list than maybe the rest is the Oilers. The Oilers desperately need goaltending, and depending on what happens here with Stuart Skinner this season, right, we're still in the playoffs there. If he continues the way he's been playing, I think the Oilers are going to be kind of similar to Carolina. Like, we've got a really good team, but we need a good goaltender. And Linus Ullmark could come in there. I hate to say it, but are the Oilers ready to maybe make some kind of weird trade with Draisaitl, right? Like, I don't even think that's something that the Oilers are really considering. But I don't know. There's always some weirdness that can happen, things you never expect, and that could be maybe the basis of a Leon Draisaitl trade. Maybe, just maybe. I've heard the rumors before, but like I said, it's all rumors until it actually happens. But what a world that would be, right? That would be a crazy blockbuster trade this summer, to say the least. The Detroit Red Wings are also on this list. They need a goaltender, but I don't think they have the proper assets to get that deal done. And, I think for the Bruins, like I said, they're looking for young forwards, and I just don't see the Red Wings trading like a Lucas Raymond or any of those players. Maybe Joe Veleno, maybe, but that's not enough to get Linus Ullmark, right? So, I think that could be an interesting deal, but a weird one. And I just don't think that really fits the Bruins. So that's why I put for the thumbnail of today's video, I put the Oilers and the Hurricanes. Because if I had to pick the two top teams at this point, in terms of their positioning, in terms of their suitability, it's probably the Hurricanes and the Oilers. And like I said, a lot depends on what happens the rest of the way for the Oilers. If they go on and win the Stanley Cup, well, maybe they're going to sit there and say, maybe we don't need Ullmark. Maybe because of Draisaitl tells them this summer, I don't want to play in Edmonton. I'm not signing a long-term extension here. Maybe that's a situation where, all right, well, at least let's get a goaltender for this guy, right? A really good one, in fact. Or it comes to the situation where they say, well, you got to be kidding me. Terrible timing with FaceTiming. Thanks. Anyway, as I finish up this video, I completely lost my train of thought. If the Oilers, maybe they get to the Stanley Cup final, you got to stop. If you get to the Stanley Cup final, is that enough? Or if they got where they've gotten this year, right? They make it to the Stanley Cup final, or they make it to the Western Conference final, and they say, listen, Stuart Skinner is not the best goalie in the league, but if he is right there with us, that is good enough, and we're okay with staying with him, right? But there's so many different things that can still come up for the Oilers, so as much as I want to put the Oilers at the top of the list, I still have Carolina. I think Carolina with Marty Necas, that is their bingo card. That is the guy that can get the deal done. And compared to these other teams, I think there's some good assets in New Jersey. I think the Kings are kind of there. But in all honesty, and I think Linus Ullmark's going to get a pretty return, right? We remember the season he had last year with the Bruins. He had another incredible season this year. It wasn't like a shot-in-the-dark thing. This is a guy that can really turn around a franchise in between the pipes and maybe even win a Stanley Cup. I really think that's possible for Linus Ullmark. I just remember his story coming in from Boston, right? Like, he was in Buffalo. He was left for dead, and he's one of these great kind of comeback stories from goaltending in Buffalo, right? We look at what happened to Robin Lehner, and now Linus Ullmark, the most recent guy to be on that list. And I think the next time the Sabres decide to let a goaltender go, they're probably going to be clutching their pearls thinking, oh man, is this guy going to come back to bite us in the ass again? We'll see. Let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think of Linus Ullmark? I know the Bruins fans really love Ullmark, and me even making this video, they're like, oh man, I don't want to talk about this. I get it, but this might be the end of the road for that incredible, beautiful goalie tandem between Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. So let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you again next time. Peace out, guys.